Chapter 2. Days Darker Than Night. Ash March shot awake. Sitting up in bed, she dragged the heavy silk sheets up over her arms and shoulders and clutched them tight. She had been dreaming of ice again. Taking deep breaths to calm herself, she looked around her chamber, checking. Of the 2 amber lamps on the mantel, only one was still burning. Good. That meant Katia had not been in to refuel it. The small ball of Ash's silver blonde hair that she had pulled from the hairbrush before she slept still lay fast against the door, so no one else had entered her chamber either. Ash relaxed just a little. Her toes formed 2 knobby lumps beneath the covers, and as they looked a ridiculously long distance away from her body, she wriggled them just to check that they were still hers. She smiled when they wiggled right back at her. Toes were funny things. The smile didn't quite take. As soon as Ash's face muscles relaxed, the fact of her dream came back to her. The sheets were twisted around her waist, and they were sticky with sweat. The yeasty smell of fear was upon them. She had another bad dream and another bad night, and it was the second in less than a week. Without thinking, Ash brought her hand to her mouth, almost as if she were trying to hold something in. The charcoal smoking in the brazier beneath a layer of oil-soaked felt, and the hot water pipe so diligently tended by the furnaceman and his team working 3 stories below. Her fingers felt icy cold. Against her will and her very best efforts, images from the dream came back to her. She saw a cavern with walls of black ice, a burned hand reaching toward her, cracks between its fingers oozing blood, dark eyes watching, waiting. Ash shivered. Swinging her hand down onto the bed, she beat the images back by pummeling the mattress as hard as she could. She wouldn't think about the dream, didn't want to know what those cold eyes wanted. 3 knocks rang lightly against the fossil wood door. Something deep inside Ash's chest, a band of muscle connecting her lungs to her heart, stiffened. Although breathless from beating the pillow, she didn't take a breath or even blink. Silent as setting dust, she told herself as her eyes focused on the door. Finely grained and hard as nails, the door's perfect gray surface was marred by 3 black thumb-sized pits, bolt holes. 6 months earlier, Ash had paid her maidservant, Katia, 4 half-silvers to go down to the metalworkers' market near Almsgate and purchase a bolt and socket for the chamber door. Katia had done her bidding, returning with an iron bar big enough to secure a fort. Ash had fixed the metal plate and socket in place herself. She had blackened a fingernail in the process and broken the backs of 2 silver brushes, but the bolt pins had gone in, and the fastening mechanism had worked smoothly, and for a week Ash had slept more soundly than she could ever remember sleeping. Until... Ash stared at the empty bolt holes. She made no motion to answer the second round of knocking. Ashira. A pause. Almost, daughter. I will have no games played with me. Tilting her body minutely, Ash slid down amid the covers. One hand stole beneath her head to turn the sweat-stained pillow face down upon mattress, while her other smoothed her hair. Just as she closed her eyes, the door creaked open. Panthero Is had brought his own lamp, and the fierce blue glow of burning kerosene put Ash's own resin lamp in the shade. Is stood in the doorway and looked at Ash. Even with her eyes closed, she knew what he was about. He made her wait before he spoke. Almost, daughter. Don't you think I know when I'm being deceived? Ash kept her eyelids closed, but not tightly. He had caught her on that in the past. In no way did she respond to his words, simply concentrated on keeping her breathing low and metered. Ashira! It was hard not to flinch. Mimicking a kind of dazed surprise, she opened her eyes and rubbed them vigorously. Oh, she said, it's you. Ignoring her show of bafflement, Panthero Is walked into the room proper, set his lamp on the wrought wood prayer ledge next to the offering bowls of dried fruits and myrrha, brought his long-fingered hands together and shook his head. The cushions, almost, daughter. The index finger on his left hand circled, indicating the foot of the bed. A sound night's sleep seldom includes kicking cushions so hard that the impression of one's foot stays upon them till dawn. Ash cursed all the cushions in Mask Fortress. She cursed Katia for piling the silly, fluffy, useless bags of goose down high on her bed each night. Panthero Is crossed over to Ash's bed. Fine gold chains woven into the fabric of his heavy silk coat clinked softly as he moved. Although not muscular, he carried something hard within him, as if his skeleton were made of stone. His face had the shape and smoothness of a skinned hare. Holding out a long, carefully manicured, completely hairless hand, he asked, How much do I love you, almost, daughter? Untaken, the hand moved away to carve a circle in the air. Look at all I give you. Dresses, silver brushes, perfumed oils. You are my father who loves me more than any real father ever could. Ash spoke Issa's own words back to him. She had lost count of how many times he had said them to her over the past 16 years. Panthero Is, Sir Lord of Spire Vanis, Lord Commander of the Raif Watch, Keeper of Mask Fortress, and Master of the Four Gates, shook his head with disappointment. You would mock me, almost daughter? Feeling a bite of guilt, Ash slid her hand over his. She owed love and respect to the man who was her foster father and Sir Lord. 16 years ago, before he took the title of Sir Lord for his own, Panthero Is had found her outside Vane Gate. She was a newborn, a foundling, abandoned within 10 paces of the city gate. All such foundlings were considered Protector's Trove. Is had been Protector General at the time, in charge of city security and defenses. He had patrolled the four gates, led his red-bladed brothers in the Watch, and commanded the forces that manned the walls. Ever since Thomas Marr had forged the first Raif sword with the steel and rendered blood of the men who betrayed him at Hove Hill, no Protector General had ever been paid for his work. For centuries, Protector Generals lived off income from their grangeholds, inheritances, and land grants. Today, there was no land left to grant, and more base-born men were joining the Watch, and Protector Generals now gain income by other, less noble means. Contraband goods, swords of illegal length and blade curvature, arrows with barbed tips, prohibited substances such as sulfur, resins, and saltpeter that could be used in making siege powders, unlawfully produced liquor, poisons, sleeping draughts, and pain dullers, ill-gotten gains, anything found in the possession of known criminals, and all goods abandoned within the city, whether they be crates of rotting cabbages, fat pigs broken loose from their tethers, or newborns left to die in the snow, were the Protector General's to do with as he saw fit. Protector's Trove had made Panthero Is a rich man. As if guessing her thoughts, Is brought his lips close to Ash's ear. Never forget, almost daughter, that during my commission I came upon dozens of foundling babies, yet you are the only one I chose to raise as my own. Ash tried, but she couldn't quite stifle the shiver that worked its way down her spine. He had sold other babies to the dark-skinned priests in the Bone Temple. You are cold, almost daughter. Panthero Is's hand, with its hairless knuckles that never cracked, glided up Ash's arm along her shoulder. His fingers prodded the flesh of Ash's neck, testing for warmth, blood pulse, and swollen glands. The urge to shrink away from his touch was overwhelming, but Ash fought it. She didn't want to provoke Is in any way. If she needed any proof of that, all she had to do was look at the 3 blind bolt holes in the fossil wood door. Your blood is racing, Ashira. Is's hand moved lower. And your heart. Unable to stand it any longer, Ash jerked back. Is grabbed hold of her nightgown and twisted the fabric in his fist. You've been having that dream again, haven't you? She didn't answer. Threads of muslin in her nightgown were laddered under the pressure of his grip. I said, haven't you? Still, Ash made no reply, but she just knew that her face gave her away. Her skin flushed with every lie. What did you see? Was it the Grey Land? The cavern? Where were you? Think. Shaking her head, Ash cried. I don't know. I don't know. It was a cavern lined with ice. It could be anywhere. Did you see what lay beyond? The words left Is's mouth like frost smoke, sparkling blue and utterly cold. They hung in the air, cooling the space between Ash and her foster father, making it difficult for Ash to breathe. Ash saw Is's lower jaw come to rest. She heard saliva smack inside his mouth. Father, I don't understand what you mean. The dream was over so quickly, I hardly remember what I saw. Panthero Is blinked at Ash's use of the word father. Sadness flitted across his face so quickly that she doubted she'd seen it at all. Slowly, intentionally, he showed his gray-cast teeth. So, it has come to this. Lies from the foundling I've raised as my own. Rare were the times where Is showed his teeth. They were small and positioned well above his lip line. Rumor had it that sorcerous healing practiced upon him when he was just a boy had burned the enamel from them. Whatever the cause, Is made his habit to speak, smile, eat, and drink without ever drawing back his lips. With one quick movement, Is found and pressed the curve of Ash's left breast. He weighed the small globe of flesh, then pinched it. You can't stay a child forever, Ashira. The old blood will show soon enough. Ash felt her cheeks burn. She didn't understand what he meant. Is regarded Ash for a long moment, his green silk robe switching colors in the fierce light of burning kerosene, before releasing his hold on her nightgown and standing. Tidy yourself up, child. Do not force me to lay hands on you again. Ash kept her breath steady and tried not to let her fear show. Questions piled on her tongue, but she knew better than to ask them. Is had a way with answers. He gave them. They sounded perfectly logical. But then, later, when you were alone and had time to think, you realized he had told you nothing at all. As Is moved away, Ash got a whiff of the smell that sometimes clung to her foster father. The smell of old things locked away so tightly that they dried to brittle husks. Something shifted at the edge of Ash's vision. All the hairs on her body bristled, and against her will, she was drawn back to her dream. Reaching. She was reaching in the darkness. Ashira! Ash snapped back. Panthero Is was looking at her, his long, skinned-man face showing the faintest sheen of excitement. Light from his lamp sent shadows flickering across the water-silked panels on the walls. Ash could still remember the soft marten and sable furs that had once hung in their stead. Is had sent a brother in the watch to tear them down and replace them with smooth, bloodless silk. Furs and animal hides were distasteful to him. He called them barbaric, and would have none hung in any chamber he might chance to enter in the massive, sprawling, four-towered fortress that formed the heart of Spire Vanis. Ash missed the furs. Her chamber seemed cold and bare without them. You are not well, almost, daughter. As Is spoke, his hands came together in a smooth knot of knuckle and flesh that was peculiar to him alone. I will sit with you through the last hour of night. Please, I need to rest. Ash rubbed her forehead, struggling to keep her mind in the now. What was wrong with her? Raising her voice, she said, Go, just go, I have to use the chamber pot. I drank too much wine at dinner. Is remained calm. Yes, wine. And to think Cadia informed me that you refused both the pewter containing the red and the silver brought later with the white. A dull metal tap sounded. Is kicking the empty chamber pot that lay at the foot of Ash's bed in the center of a hail of cushions. And somehow you managed to wait until now to relieve yourself. Cadia. Always Cadia. Ash scowled. Her head ached, and her body felt as tired and shaky as if she'd spent the night running uphill rather than sleeping in her bed. She desperately wanted to be alone. Surprisingly, Is crossed over to the door, fingers slipping into the vacant bolt holes. He turned to face Ash and said, I will leave my knife outside your door tonight. You are not well, almost, daughter. I worry. The idea of having the knife camped outside her chamber frightened Ash nearly as much as her dream. Marifus' eyes scared her. He scared a lot of people in Mask Fortress. That was, she supposed, the main reason her foster father kept him around. Can't we call Cadia instead? Is began shaking his head before Ash finished speaking. I think our little Cadia might not be a wholly reliable guardian. Take tonight. You said you drank wine, yet she swore you didn't. And of course, I must take my daughter's word over the common servant. So, I have no choice but to conclude the girl reported wrongly, and might easily do so again. A cold smile. You are not well, Ashira. Ill dreams trouble you. Headaches plague you. What sort of father could I call myself if I did not watch my daughter closely? Ash bent her head. She wanted to sleep, close her eyes, and not have to dream. Her foster father was too clever for her. Lies, even small ones, were a silken rope in his hands. He could pull and distort them, use them to tie their speaker up in knots. She'd gotten herself into enough trouble tonight. The best thing to do would to be say nothing more, nod her head meekly, and let her foster father bid her good night. He was already making his way towards the door. Another minute, and he would be gone. Yet, she was Ash March, foundling, left outside Vanegate to die. She had been abandoned in 2 feet of snow, wrapped in a blanket stiff with womb blood, beneath a sky as dark as night in the 12th storm of winter. She had been forsaken, yet somehow she had lived. She had been weak, yet some tiny spark of life within her had proven strong. Straightening her spine, she looked her foster father straight in the eyes and said, I want to know what's happening to me. Holding her gaze, Is reached for the kerosene lamp. The iron base was stamped with the Sir Lord's seal. The killhound rampant, the great smoke-gray bird of prey sinking its claws the size of meat hooks into the tip of the iron spire. Ash remembered her foster father telling her that although killhounds fed on spring lambs, bear cubs, and elk calves, they were known for killing hunting dogs that ranged too close to the heirs. They never feed upon the hounds they kill, Is had said, a gleam of fascination firing his normally cold eyes. Though they do make sport with the carcasses. Ash shivered. Is closed the spill hole, snuffing the lamp. Holding open the fossil wood door, he stepped into the column of cold air that rushed in from the corridor beyond. There's nothing to be worried about, almost, daughter. They're just catching up, that's all. Surely Katia must have told you that most girls your age are women in all senses of the word. Your body is simply doing those things that theirs have already done. One would hardly expect such changes to occur without some small measure of pain. With that, he moved into the shadows of the corridor, swiftly becoming one himself. The metal chains sewn into his coat chimed softly like faraway bells, and then the door clicked shut, and there was silence. Ash fell back onto the bed, shaking and strangely excited. She pulled the covers over her chest and set her mind to thinking of ways she could find answers for herself. Her foster father's words only sounded like the truth. She knew she wouldn't sleep, could absolutely swear she wouldn't sleep, yet somehow, unbelievably, she did. Her dreams, when they came, were all of ice. Chapter 1, Part 2. The listener could not sleep. His ears, what were left of them, pained him like two rotting teeth. Nolo had brought him fresh bear tallow from the rendering pit, and it was good and white and looked creamy enough to eat, so the listener had done just that. Waste of good tallow, using it to plug up two old black holes that had once been ears. Waste of good muskox hair to warm them, too. But there was little to be done about that. Nothing needed warming as much as an old scar. Nolo's footprints formed a visible line to and from the rendering pit, then over to the meat rack in the center of the cleared space. Looking at them, the listener made a mental note to have a talk with Nolo's wife, Sela. She wasn't filling her husband's mucklucks with enough dried grass. Nolo's booted feet had melted snow. Sela would have to get chewing. The listener spent an idle moment imagining Sela's plump lips chewing on a tuft of cold grass to make it soft enough for stuffing into the space between her husband's outer and inner boots. It was a very pleasant moment. Sela had unusually fine lips. Still, he was old and had no ears, and Sela was young and had a husband, and together they had 4 good ears between them. So the listener nudged aside the image of Sela and turned to the matter at hand, his dream. Sitting on a stool carved out of whalebone, with his old brain-tanned bear's hide around his shoulders, the listener sat at the entrance to his ground and looked out at the night. The heat from his 2 soapstone lamps warmed his back, and the cold from the still, freezing air chilled his front. That was the way he liked it when he was listening to his dreams. Ludovic, the one who listened before him, swore that a man could only hear his dreams as he was having them, yet the listener thought him mistaken. Much like Nolo's boot linings, dreams needed to be chewed on. The listener listened. In his lap he held the hollow tip of a narwhal's tusk, a little silver knife that had once been used to kill a starving child, a chunk of sea salt, hardened driftwood from a wrecked ship that had been beset, then stoved in by the cold blue ice of Endsea. Like all good talismans, they felt right in the hand, and as the listener's body heat warmed them in varying degrees, they released his mind into the half-world that was part darkness and part light. Fear gripped at the listener's belly as he fell into his dreams. Hands reached. Loss wept. A man with an impossible choice made the best decision he could. Saddlelook! Saddlelook! You must awaken before the cold burns your skin! The listener opened his eyes. Nolo was standing above him. The small, dark-skinned man had his prized squirrel coat tucked under his arm and a bowl of something hot and steaming in his hand. The listener shifted his gaze from Nolo to the night sky. The pale glow of dawn could clearly be seen across the Bay of Ox. Stars faded even as the listener looked away. He had been listening to his dream for half the night. Nolo tucked the squirrel coat around the listener's shoulders and then held out the steaming bowl. Bear soup, Saddlelook! Scylla made me swear to watch you drink it! The listener nodded gruffly, though in truth he was quite pleased. Not about the bear soup, which he could get from any fire around the rendering pit, but for the fact that Scylla's attention. The bear soup was hot, dark, and strong. The bits of sinew, bear fat, and marrow bobbed upon the surface. The listener enjoyed the feel of steam on his face as he drank. The warmth of the bone bowl soothed the joints in his black, hard-as-wood hands. When he had finished, he held out the empty bowl for Nolo to take. Go now. I will return the squirrel coat to you when I am rested. Nolo took the bowl with all the usual carefulness of a husband handling one of his wife's best dishes and made his way back to his ground. The listener envied him. After what his dreams had shown him this night, the listener knew that such a base and mortal emotion should be beneath him, but it wasn't, and that was the way of the world. The listener had seen the one with reaching arms reach out and beckon the darkness, and that meant only one thing. Days darker than night lay ahead. Pulling hides across the doorway, the listener retreated into the warmth and golden light of his ground. His bench was thick with animal hides heaped high with fresh white heather, and he lay down upon it and closed his eyes. He had no wish to dream and sleep, so he turned his thoughts to Sela and imagined her and Nolo sledding across the frozen margins of Endsea. He imagined the rime of ice beneath the sled runners wearing thin, and Nolo calling a halt so that his wife could make a new ice by the quickest way she could. This pleasant image held the listener's attention for only a short spell. There was work to be done. Messages had to be sent. Days darker than night lay ahead, and those who lived to know such things needed to be told. Let no one say that Saddlelook, listener of the Ice Trapper tribe, was not the first to know.